Okay, so here's a quick tutorial on how to solve a quadratic equation by factoring. We did this in class today, so I'm just simply going to do this with some examples. Number 10 on your worksheet gives you something that looks like this, okay? So we talked about what can we do to make the a 1, because when we know how to factor when a is 1. And what do I mean by a? I mean that ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. This here is the standard form of a quadratic equation. So if I have this standard form, I have an a and a b and a c. And if I can make the a 1, then this is going to be much easier to factor. So what I'm going to do is divide by 7 on both sides. I get r squared minus 2r equals negative 1. I have to set it equal to 0. R squared minus 2r plus 1 equals 0. And what are factors of 1 that add to make negative 2? That's kind of a piece of cake. We're only going to get 1s. But what do we have to make sure that we know? The only way to get a positive product and a negative sum is if we have 2 negatives. So I put the 1 and the 1 here. If I set up my trusty T-chart, I really don't have to, because I'm only going to have one answer. Because the zero product property means that anything times 0 equals 0. So it doesn't matter what's in my other factor, I can make sure that I do that. Now, this worked out really nicely because 7, 14, and negative 7 are all divisible by 7, and they get you whole numbers. But what happens here with number 15? So the first thing we have to do is set it equal to 0. Subtracting 5 from both sides. Now I can't divide by 3 because 16 isn't divisible by 3, so I can't really divide by 3, so I have to kind of put this whole thing off to the side. I can't look for factors of c that add to make b, because that only works when a is 1, and in this case a is 3. So we're going to do this by trial and error. The only way I can get 3r squared is if I multiply 3r times r. The only way I can get a negative product and a negative sum is if I have a positive and a negative in each of my factors. So this is kind of annoying because, well, I might have to switch around, and that's why this is called trial and error. So the first thing that comes to mind is in 12 is 4 and 3. So let's say negative 4 times positive 3, that gives us 12. But we're not quite sure that these are the factors until we do FOIL, until we actually do the distributive property. So I'm going to do FOIL here, and I'm going to check it. 3r times r is 3r squared. The outer is positive 9r, and the inner is negative 4r. So we can kind of stop right there, because we're looking for a negative 16r, and we know that that won't do it. So because it's trial and error, we're going to try again. Let's try 6 and 2. Or let's switch these around. What if I said negative 3 and positive 4? Now, instead of doing the first and the last, we already know that the first term is going to be 3r squared, and we already know that the last term is going to be negative 12, right? So I like to call this the OI in the FOIL. So we really only have to check the outer and the inner to see if it comes out to be negative 16r. So the outer is positive 12, and the inner, well, that's not going to work, is it? Is negative 3r. So that's not going to work. So again, we have to try again. Don't forget my equals 0. So let's try 6 and 2. Plus 2 minus 6. Let's see if that works. So again, we're just going to try the OI. Outer is negative 18r, and inner is positive 2r. Woohoo! We got it. So that means these are the factors. So I'm going to rewrite these factors, 3r plus 2 and r minus 6. And of course, if you're using a pencil, you can just erase and keep trying this trial and error, okay? And then what I want to see is we really have to understand that because of the zero product property, if this guy is 0, the whole thing is 0, or if this guy is 0, the whole thing is 0. So I'm going to set up my trusty T-chart. I'm going to set this factor equal to 0, and I'm going to set this factor equal to 0. So when I solve for r here, I get 3r equals negative 2, r equals negative 2/3, and here r equals 6. So my final answer is in those brackets, negative 2/3 and 6. Okay? So that can be kind of annoying to do all of that trial and error. So there's got to be another way, right? Yeah, there is. And that's called grouping by factoring, but we're not going to do that right now. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to talk to you about the formula. And I'm going to take this guy. I'm not going to do a sheet, one of them from the formula sheet, but I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to rewrite it. So 3r, whoops, can't see it, there it is. 3r squared minus 16r minus 7 equals 5. With the formula, I have to set it equal to 0 as well. So I have to make sure I set it equal to 0. Again with the formula, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 is not the formula. It's the standard form of a quadratic equation. So knowing that, I can identify my a, which is 3, my b, which is negative 16, and my c, which is negative 12. So the formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And that's something I just have to memorize, that formula. So if I take this information and I plug it into here, I have x equals negative 16, and don't forget your parentheses, plus or minus the square root of negative 16 in parentheses squared minus 4 times parentheses 3 times c parentheses negative 12 all over 2 times 3. Now the cool thing is I can do this in my calculator. But remember, the plus or minus means that I have 2 answers. So again, I'm going to set up my trusty T-chart, and I'm going to put this stuff into my calculator. First I'm going to add this and get the answer, and then I'm going to subtract this and get the answer. So in your calculator you should be doing this. Actually, you should pause it, do it in your calculator, and we already know the answers, so we should be getting the right answers. Okay, so if you found the answers, follow me along. I press negative parentheses negative 16 plus the square root of parentheses negative 16 squared minus 4 parentheses 3 parentheses negative 12, and then I'm going to press enter. Enter. So that gives me 36. 36 divided by 2 times 3 divided by 6 is 6. Now, didn't we kind of know that that was the answer already? Let's look. There was the answer. There's our 6. Oh, it's not x, it's r, but that's okay. Same difference. Okay, so now we're going to do this with the minus. All right, so again, we do negative parentheses 16, negative 16 in parentheses, minus now the square root of parentheses negative 16 squared, minus 4 parentheses 3 parentheses negative 12, enter, and that gives me negative 4, okay? So x equals negative 4 over 6, which equals negative 2/3. And didn't we say that that was the answer? Okay? So when a is greater than 1, this way can be really, really like just annoying, right? If you have to keep trying these things, these trial and errors. So if a is greater than 1, we always want to kind of look to see if we can, you know, if we can't factor. I mean, you can, but it's kind of annoying to find it. We can always use the quadratic formula and still get the right answer. Okay? So now you can do your homework. Go back and see if you need to go through anything else that I did. But let's not forget, set it equal to 0 and your trusty T-chart.